Hello, I'm political specialist Sean Boyd. The election is just a few days away, and if you're still undecided on Proposition HH, you've come to the right place. In simple terms, Prop HH is a trade-off: property tax relief for your TABOR tax refunds. I did a reality check on some of the claims being made about it. You can find that on our politics page. I also sat down with two experts to dig into the pros and cons. Kerry Kennedy helped write Prop HH, but we begin with Douglas Bruce, who wrote the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, or TABOR. So generally speaking, TABOR requires voter approval for any tax increase, and then it limits the amount of taxpayer money that the government can keep and spend to inflation plus population growth.
On an annual basis.
Right. So, as you know, most Democratic lawmakers will say that since this was approved in 1992, the TABOR has prevented them from adequately funding education, transportation, important government functions. Attempts to overturn it, which there have been quite a few over the years, have failed. Conservatives will say Proposition HH is yet another attempt to essentially overturn TABOR. And while it doesn't directly repeal TABOR, it certainly changes the formula that TABOR has by allowing the government to keep and spend exponentially more money each year. The state is far more liberal today than it's been in the past, even since the last time this was voted on, Ref C in 2019. Do you think that voters are at the point where they're ready to get rid of TABOR?
No, it's very simple to explain why HH is the worst ballot issue I've seen in 50 years. 50 years. It is the biggest tax increase of any state government in history. It doesn't matter how far back you go. They cannot raise taxes without voter approval. TABOR has a number of requirements that people who've lived here for a while know. One of which is you have to tell people how much money you're asking for. And they don't do that in HH. They have a 48-page bill. It's like that, 48 pages. And it doesn't tell people how much money the government wants. That's illegal in itself. It's illegal to try to amend a statute with a constitutional amendment, or to amend the Constitution with a statute. You have to have a 2/3 vote just to put it on the ballot if it's a constitutional amendment. They aren't doing that. It is the most lawless, dishonest, false scam I have ever seen in my life.
Let's talk about how much money it does allow, how much more money it allows the government to keep and spend each year. It's a compounding 1%, right, increase in the cap. And so how is that going to undermine TABOR?
Well, first, we never get to vote again. Not in 10 years, not in 100 years. We never get to vote again. So you're voting not only to give them a blank check forever, but you're voting to give up your right to vote on taxes at the state level forever. Forever is a long time. And you're voting to give up your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren's right to vote. It is so enormously, in 48 pages, they've stuck in so many lies, so many illegalities. It would take a 2-hour program just to list them all.
So, voters elect representatives to represent them. The legislature will have to vote to continue this in the future. So why not let the legislature decide this, since they represent the people? If the people disagree with them, they can vote them out of office, right?
We heard that argument 30 years ago when they said that TABOR would ruin Colorado. We have passed it, and we've had 30 years of prosperity. In fact, the irony is people's valuations went up, partly because the economy under TABOR is better than it was before TABOR passed. They said that Colorado would be ruined. Those people who lived here 30 years ago remember all those lies that they told. Now they're telling them again. They say, oh, you can trust us this time. When HH was written with lie after lie after lie, and it was put on the ballot the last day that they could. And they didn't have any public hearings where people could come in and testify. They violated every rule and custom for putting issues on the ballot. And you cannot put on the ballot a law, a statute, to amend the Constitution. That requires a constitutional amendment. And they are counting on the fact that people have been so dumbed down by government schools for years, people don't know what their rights are. But I'm here to tell you, you have had the right to vote for tax increases or against them for 30 years, and you're better off because of that. We don't need to have them try to come up with a new rule after 30 years of their telling lie after lie after lie. It is the biggest, most enormous scam I am aware of in American history.
I think they called you a terrorist last time.
That's right. The governor said I was a terrorist, and I printed a business card that said Douglas Bruce terrorist. But right after that came Oklahoma City bombing, so I thought it was bad taste. So people know that this isn't terrorism. This is about your right to vote as an American. So whether you want to have government taking a bigger share of your money. Here what they're saying is, we'll take $1,500 a year from an average couple, and we'll give you back 50 or 100 bucks in property tax relief. That's the worst bargain you can imagine.
So people are very concerned, though, about spikes in property taxes right now. So if not Prop HH, then what?
What people are not aware of is that the TABOR Amendment already anticipates there can be periods of prosperity. That's what we're talking about, a 40% increase over 2 years in your home valuations. But the TABOR Amendment requires in Section 7C that the mill levy has to go down, the tax rate has to go down, so the government does not get a windfall profit. Their increase goes up by inflation plus population. If they want more, they have to get voter approval. Here they're saying, vote now and you'll never have to vote again.
You know, voters have allowed many local governments to essentially bypass the TABOR limits, which is called debrucing here in Colorado.
Which is not legal. It's not legal to say you can have a local vote that you won't obey the Constitution. Think about if they said that, can we suspend freedom of speech or freedom of religion in our school district or in our city or in our county? We can't do that. It's in the Constitution. They can't change the Constitution except by putting on the ballot and passing a constitutional amendment. And this is not it.
So the places that have debruced, you're saying, have done that illegally in your mind?
It's not legal. So there are 5,000 local governments. I can't enforce the law, the basic law. You know, what they said before TABOR passed was, we shouldn't put it in the Constitution where it can't be changed. And now they're trying to change it just by a vote anytime they want.
I think one of the things, one of the selling points with Prop HH for supporters has been that this money that they'll be keeping from TABOR refunds will go toward backfilling local governments. Most of the money will go to schools, and even non-partisan fiscal analysts have said that, 80% probably. That has made, I think, a lot of voters more willing to support this, saying, I'm willing to give up a little bit of my TABOR refund to backfill local governments and schools.
It's not a little bit, it's all of it, 100%. Over the period of the next few years, you're going to lose 100% of your state tax refund forever. A married couple got $1,500 check last year, thanks to TABOR. And when you speak about helping local governments are against HH. There are 5,000 local governments, and the Special District Association represents the directors in over 3,500 of them. And they are unanimously against HH. They don't want this ripoff. They know it's going to not provide them the same amount of money or the growing revenue as under TABOR. that they have now. Colorado counties. I used to be a county commissioner. Colorado counties is against HH.
Education groups are in favor of it.
Who is?
Education groups, teachers'
Well, they're in
unions.
favor of it because school district employees are going to get $10,000 and $20,000 annual increases. That doesn't help your children. For the director of social programs or something to get a increase from 80,000 to 100,000 a year, forever. A majority of school district employees are not teachers. You're not helping the teachers by giving money to the assistant deputy vice principal.
Well, the school boards would decide how to spend the money. Right.
They can still decide how to spend the money.
Right.
We're just saying if they want to grow faster than inflation plus population combined, and that increase in all governments in Colorado has been over 30 years, is they've gotten double or triple the amount of dollars that they had before TABOR passed. So they're not losing any money. We're not cutting anything. TABOR is not cutting anything. It's simply regulating the growth of increase before the government takes an ever-increasing share. You would not, in the rest of your life, sign a blank check to anybody just because you like them. And that's what they want to have people do. They want to have them give up their right to vote to control the size of government. For government is growing, but it's not growing at an unlimited rate. It's growing at a limited rate.
Let me ask you, do you think that education and transportation are adequately funded in Colorado?
I think we could spend more money out of the ever-growing budget on roads, for example. We should have, it's my personal opinion, people should have a choice of where they send their children to school. They should have some control. The school boards should be more respectful of the parents that want to have their children getting an education. But we're not here talking about education
Right.
specifically. We're here talking about giving up your state tax refunds forever and giving up your right to vote forever so that the government gets a blank check on how to spend the money forever.
The alternative, though, to this, you think, is just to lower the mill levy? Mill levies.
That's what the Constitution says. I wrote the TABOR Amendment, and that's what it says. All they have to do is stop scaring people. They put HH on the ballot because they knew that people were facing increased valuations, and they think that if your valuation goes up 40%, your tax will go up 40%. That's not true. We don't have to tolerate. I'll be the first person out there on the picket line if the governments, state or local, try to keep a windfall money that's illegal. That's why we have elections under TABOR. If they want to keep the excess increase above the ordinary increase, then they get voter approval. The power is in our hands. We shouldn't give up our power, which is our sacred right to vote.
You wrote TABOR. If you could rewrite it now, all these years later, is there anything you would change about it?
I would have made it even stronger, but it passed with 53.7% of the vote. That's cutting it a little close. If I made a change 2 years before that, it might have taken away 1 percentage point of the vote in favor. It might have taken 4%. So I'm happy with TABOR. I want people, I'm not here to do a sales job for TABOR. I'm here telling people they must, for the sake of their children, their grandchildren, their neighbors, children and grandchildren, they must vote against giving up their right to vote forever. And another mechanical issue is, they talk about a little bit of property tax relief for billions of dollars in excess money staying with the state. None of that benefit for the property tax relief goes to renters. We got 2 million renters here, and they get nothing. All they do is they lose their $1,500 refunds. you would be a fool to give up your $1,500 refunds because politicians in Denver made a promise that they would spend the money better. All they know how to do is shovel the money out the door.
You own quite a few investment properties.
No,
not anymore.
I've sold them.
So people who do own investment properties get a break the first year, but not in years after that, under Proposition HH. So there is some concern that this might not regulate the increase in rents. I think is what you're referring to.
This has nothing to do with rent. The government cannot promise what your rent is going to be in the future if you're a renter. But they put in a token amount. It's such an insult. 2 million renters, they have to share among themselves $20 million. That's $10 per household of people who rent. $10 a year that you will get, maybe, and it'll all be dissipated in the bureaucracy, in the programs, and the salaries, and all that stuff. But even so, you want to vote to get $10 for your family at the price of your giving up $5,000 in the next decade? It's crazy. It's unbelievable. Apart from being illegal, apart from it being a bad idea, apart from its picking winners and losers, it doesn't help seniors. They claim it helps seniors.
Well, it makes their senior homestead tax exemption portable now. So
they can do that right now. They don't need HH to make it portable. People have been talking about making the portability of your homestead exemption
they've tried that
transferable.
repeatedly at the Capitol.
They don't need it. They wanted to save that as an inducement, as a trade-off for people to do this forever. Give up your right to vote forever. I'm not going to give up my right to vote. I don't care if they offered me $1 million a year.
So what happens if HH passes? What would you do?
Frankly, it's got so many illegalities in it, it's going to be the subject of litigation, because you cannot change the Constitution by passing a statute, by passing an ordinary law. That's why it's in the Constitution, protected from dishonest legislators. I know about dishonest legislators because I've had to deal with them for decades. Everybody else has as well. Why would they trust a group of not acknowledged, known liars with the right to take away their right to vote on revenue and go back to the bad old days of a blank check?
They voted these people into office.
Because they had no choice, because the system is rigged, okay? They got people in both parties that they all take an oath to uphold the Constitution, but there aren't 10 of them that have even read it.
Mr. Bruce, thank you for joining me. Any final remarks?
Vote no on HH. I would suggest that people go to a website that I've set up. It's hh-no.com. hh-no.com. There they can read a 2-page flyer that explains things much more detailed than we have time for here. It has ways to explain to people where this is the most dangerous ballot issue I've seen in my lifetime.
I am joined by Kerry Kennedy, former state treasurer and an advisor to Governor Polis, and you helped craft the bill that led to Proposition HH. Thanks for coming in today. This is a complicated ballot measure, and I think some conservatives would argue more complicated than it needs to be. If it were just about property taxes, I know the legislature can lower property taxes on its own. This is about the state asking, can we keep and spend more of your money under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights? And, some would say we're being asked to pay for our relief. So why do it this way? Why use TABOR refunds?
Yeah, well, Sean, thank you for having me. And this year, Prop HH on the ballot in November is a wonderful opportunity for the people of Colorado to avoid what is otherwise going to be real pressure on housing costs. And that's because folks have seen their home values go up dramatically. We're seeing a 40% increase statewide. For many homeowners around the state, they've seen their values up 50, 60, even more percent. That's in large part due to a shortage of housing in the state and also the impacts of COVID. But because your property tax is a percentage of the value of your home, nobody's increasing property taxes. But your property tax bill is going to go up because your value went up. And on an average statewide, most people are going to see their property tax bill go up by more than $1,000. I think the governor, legislative leaders felt like that's a big hit that a lot of folks just can't afford. Right. It's a big bill that's coming at the end of this year. So they worked to put Proposition HH on the ballot that will cut that increase in folks' property tax bills in half. It's a huge savings for homeowners, also for businesses around the state. We hear a lot of businesses saying that their property taxes are quite high. It's hard to compete with online retailers. So this is to help keep housing affordable in our state. It's to help keep businesses competitive in our state and to make sure that people in Colorado aren't hit with a big tax increase at the end of this year. At the same time, there are a lot of local governments. All local governments rely on that property tax revenue to fund their services, particularly schools. But yeah, your special districts, your fire districts, your water districts, your parks districts. And they are at a time right now where they can't really afford to take a cut. They can't afford to lose revenue. So Prop HH is a responsible property tax relief bill. It provides 10 years of property tax savings, $13 billion of property tax relief over the decade, but it does so in a way that captures a portion of the state's TABOR surplus and uses it to backfill the revenue that those fire districts and those school districts and those other local governments are going to lose when we bring down these property tax rates. So it's really not confusing. It allows homeowners and property owners to avoid a big increase in the property tax bill and not impact the funding that your local governments are going to be able to rely upon.
So why use TABOR refunds to do the backfill? Why not use other revenue? And in regard to local governments, you know, regardless of whether Proposition HH passes or not, property taxes are still going to go up significantly. So do local governments really need, whether it's a 40 or 30% increase?
Okay, well, keep in mind that growth isn't uniform across the state.
Right.
So you see large growth in some of the metro areas, some of the resort areas, but the rest of the state really isn't seeing that kind of growth. So when you bring these rates down statewide, it's important that we come in and make sure that those local districts have backfill and don't have to cut the services that we're providing. I think also a lot of people would say right now the schools need the money. We have half the school districts in the state today with an average, over half the districts in the state with an average teacher salary under $45,000 a year. We hear a lot about how school districts around the state can't attract and retain and keep educators in the classroom. So now's not the time to cut funding for our public schools, and what a great opportunity to be able to provide significant ongoing property tax relief, the largest property tax relief that we've seen, and avoid this big increase in people's bills, but also do it in a way that makes sure that we're doing right by our schools and our teachers and the local services that we care about. And you asked why use a portion of the TABOR surplus. And it's because the surplus has grown quite large. Even with Proposition HH, we're going to be able to, people will get, they're guaranteed to get refund checks, TABOR refund checks under the Constitution. This doesn't change TABOR. It leaves that constitutional guarantee that when you have revenue coming in over the cap, people get these refund checks. And if Prop HH passes, all taxpayers will get $832 back this year. That's more than the $750 they got last year. And then the following year, their refund would be reduced by $46, but it's still expected to be hundreds of dollars, probably over $500. It's hard to predict what revenues will do, but as long as revenues are growing, people will still get large and growing TABOR refunds. They will be smaller, and that portion of revenue will be used to backfill this property tax relief.
Why doesn't the state make cuts somewhere else to provide us with relief?
Well, Colorado's already has a lean state budget. We have very lean and efficient investment in schools and transportation and higher education. And the governor is really committed to making sure we keep taxes low and we keep property taxes low, but wants to do it in a way that ensures that we're providing the foundational and stable revenue base for the services that we all rely upon.
Some analysis has found that over 10 years and even beyond, the legislature can extend this without voter approval. But, you know, that over those 10 or 20 years, we're actually going to lose more money from our TABOR tax refunds than we'll get in property tax relief. And I know you disagree with that. As you've said, it's difficult to predict 10 years, let alone 20 years into the future when you're talking about the economy. But Common Sense Institute, a pro-business group, did a study, and its analysis was based on historic revenue growth. And it found that, you know, in the long run, we're going to lose more money. And even over that 10-year period, we'd break even. So how do you respond to concerns that, you know, this really isn't even worth it over that 10-year period because it's a wash?
Yes, so we don't think there are a lot of ways to model what happens 10 years from now, but their analysis assumes that there's absolutely no economic downturn within the next decade. We don't think that's accurate. If you go back historically, there's always ebbs and flows in the economy. What we know with Prop HH is that the relief people are going to get on their property taxes is guaranteed. Doesn't matter what happens with the economy. The rates are going to be down. People are going to avoid paying that additional $600, $700, $800,000 in their taxes every single year for 10 years. On the TABOR refund side, the surplus has sort of come and go. People only got TABOR refunds in 5 out of the last 10 years. It really depends on what's happening with the state's revenue growth, with the state's economy. So our modeling, the Colorado Fiscal Institute did a analysis, and that shows people would only expect to lose a lot less than what they would save in their property taxes.
Over that 10 years.
Save $6,000 in their property taxes over that decade and only lose about $419 over the entire decade in their TABOR refunds. That, again, is if you have a recessionary scenario during this 10-year window. So it depends is the answer. I don't think there any studies that show people are going to come out behind. Really, this is $13 billion of property tax relief guaranteed over the next 10 years, and people will be giving up a portion of their TABOR refunds. And honestly, Sean, even giving up a portion of their refunds, the Fiscal Institute study shows people would still expect to get, families would still expect to get $10,000 back in TABOR refund checks over the decade with Prop HH if we see the kind of growth in the economy that you were referring to, the study you were referring to. Mm-hmm. So there's a big upside. Yes, your refund check's going to be smaller, but you will still get a large and growing TABOR refund check if the economy is growing like that and we don't see a recession.
I think this is where people become confused. They hear so many numbers. You know, if the economy does this is what might happen. If this happens, you know, you can expect something else. You know, local taxes also play into this, though, and Proposition HH caps how much money local governments can keep to inflation. I guess first, why inflation? And then second, you know, local governments can waive the cap, and in all but a dozen Colorado counties, they've already waived the TABOR cap. So why wouldn't they just waive this cap too?
Yeah,
You know?
I'm really glad you're bringing that up, because the folks who put Prop HH on the ballot didn't want to just protect property owners this year from growth in their property taxes when their values grow. They wanted to look at the long term and make sure in future years, when your value goes up, that you don't see your tax bill just going up and up and up and up. So Prop HH includes a cap on the growth in property tax collections for all of our taxing districts. Doesn't include school districts, but for everybody else. And that cap is the rate of inflation. So their collections can't grow faster than inflation. Right. But importantly, Prop HH preserves local control. So at the local level, if you're in a community where they need to build a new jail, or they have a lot of growth in their community and they're dealing with the impacts of traffic and infrastructure, they can have notice their property owners. They've got a lot of natural growth in their values. They can notice their property owners, have a public hearing. They have to take public input at that hearing. And then they, as a governing body, can say, they can't raise a rate without a vote.
Right.
But they can, as a governing body, say, we want to keep some of the natural growth in our property tax revenue coming in over this cap because we have these needs. But they have to tell their local voters what they're going to spend it on. So importantly, property taxes are a local tax. They're imposed by your water district, your fire district, your school district. And Prop HH ensures that the control, the decision-making over property taxes remains at a local level.
So why is it then that the Colorado Municipal League, Colorado counties, some 20 different special districts are opposed to Proposition HH? If this actually, allows them to keep some local control, it backfills the lost revenue, why would they oppose it?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say all of them. There are a lot of county commissioners, there are a lot of local government folks that are supporting Proposition HH.
Yeah.
And most of those organizations like this. They're okay with this cap. They don't want any limit on property taxes. Proposition HH is avoiding a big increase in people's property tax bills, and you do have a lot of local governments out there that want the money. Mm-hmm. And so this strikes the right balance between saying, hold on,
so
this
it's
is a
good
big
that they
increase. This is a big increase in people's tax bills, and this is going to avoid that and provide ongoing 10 years of property tax cuts, but also preserve most of the decision-making around property taxes on an ongoing basis at the local level where it belongs.
A lot of the money, Blue Book says 80%, could be up to 90% is going to go to education, not to local governments. So schools are expected to be fully funded by next year. This would be on top of the funding that they receive from the General Assembly. This would be extra money, right? And I guess why $9 billion to schools over this 10-year period? Why not put more of the money to local governments and special districts?
With Proposition HH, that backfill to all your local government, it continues until they're up 20%. Once their revenues are up 20%, we felt like, and the folks who put Prop HH together felt like that was a big enough increase in their budgets that they didn't need to keep getting backfill after that. Mm-hmm. For K-12 education, it's a little bit different because schools are funded jointly with property tax and with state dollars. Right. So every time you remove or save a taxpayer, a property owner, some of their property tax revenue, a lot of that would have gone to their school district. And what doesn't get to their school district, in essence, comes from the state. So if we are going to fully fund public education, then we need to make sure that we are providing a full backfill, replacing all of that lost property tax revenue for our school districts on an ongoing basis. That's what Prop HH does.
So this is on top of the general fund money. They would still continue to get their general fund what the inflationary increase and
Right.
from the state, right?
But that inflationary increase
This
is
isn't
paid for
replacing
in
that.
part with property tax and in part with general fund. It's
Right.
shared financing for
Right.
schools.
This isn't replacing the
It's
money
replacing
that
the
they're
property tax
Right.
revenue
Okay.
that people aren't going to pay because
Not
we're
the general
lowering their
fund.
property tax rates.
not the general fund money. As we've discussed, people's property taxes are still going to go up, whether Proposition HH passes or not. So whether it's 40% or it's 30%, it's still going to be considerable. And I wonder, if people are going to be paying so much more, even after Proposition HH passes, if they're going to be upset. I'm maybe set some realistic expectations here that, Prop HH is certainly going to bring that increase down by hundreds of dollars, but, it's still going to go up and it's still going to hurt. Do you think proponents have been as clear as they need to be about that?
And this is why you need Prop HH.
Yeah.
It cuts the average increase in half. So it's a substantial savings to homeowners all across the state. And as you pointed out, there's also a local component where Prop HH puts the kind of accountability on your local elected officials who impose that property tax to say you have to lower your rates at the local level to provide additional savings for your property owners unless you have a community conversation and you hold a public hearing, you let folks know that you want to keep some of the money over that cap. But otherwise, rates under law will have to come down. So you're going to see substantial savings for property owners around the state, but it is going to vary depending on where you live and what your local governing bodies decide to do.
Do you think proponents have been clear enough with voters about that, look, this isn't going to take away the increase altogether. You're still going to pay more, right? It's still going to hurt.
Yeah, we consistently say
Yeah.
it cuts the increase in half. We're confident that it cuts the increase in half. The data shows that. And that's a big savings for a lot of people.
Yeah.
To have a $500 increase on your bill rather than a $1,000 increase on your bill, and to have that savings year after year after year for the decade is real savings for people. It's, for a lot of families, this is going to be a real challenge for them to pay. And I also want to just mention for folks who don't own a home, and they rent a home or they rent an apartment.
A third of our state.
We regularly see when property tax bills go up, landlords pass that through in the form of higher rent. They don't have any other way to cover it. They pass it through in the form of higher rent. So by passing Proposition HH, you're avoiding that increase in rent that people would otherwise expect to see.
They get that for 1 year for secondary homes. Landlords get the relief at that level for 1 year, and then they get less of a break after that.
For multifamily properties, the protection is the same as it is for owner-occupied homes. But you're absolutely right. The legislature, in working with the resort communities, really wanted to make sure that we have lower tax rates overall for owner-occupied homes and multifamily properties than for second homes. They really wanted to create that distinction in the law. It's in most states. People's second home, their third home, their ski house is going to have a slightly higher tax rate.
Okay. All right. We're going to have to leave it at that. We could talk for hours about this, right? Thank you for coming in and for sharing this information with us. I think it's very valuable, so appreciate it.